Unlocking Sailing at Night webinar that we're hosting. We're doing these webinars every Tuesday and every Thursday night at 6 p.m. We changed platforms this week just to get more volume. We had a lot of people that couldn't get on the Zoom because of our plan was at 100 people. And we also wanted the ability to record these so you can play them back. Now, this is an interactive webinar, so please ask questions as we go. Make yourself comfortable, grab a cocktail, and enjoy it, because this is for you guys. This is just something we want to keep you involved in the sailing while we can't really do much sailing. I mean, a lot of people are completely without being able to go sailing, and some people are having to just sail by themselves. And so since all the racing has been canceled, pretty much right now we're looking at races canceled into June. So let's take that time, learn a little bit, improve why we can from our own homes, why we're in quarantine, and do this. And we've been practicing that here at Ullman Sales. We're really on a skeleton crew, working only on essential things, and we're going to, like I said, continue these webinars every Tuesday and every Thursday at 6 p.m. and invite anybody you want. Invite your entire crew. Now, a little bit about me so you understand who I am. I'm Chuck Skewes. I own 3 Ullman Sales lofts. I've been doing this since 1986, and I've had some fortunate successes in sailboat racing, and I do a tremendous amount of sailboat cruising. I'm involved in the Baja Rally every year. We started in 2013 doing sail repair for people as they went down the coast. And so I do that 800-mile cruise. I've done a cruise to Hawaii. I've done a couple other cruises to Cabo. And so I cruise in the neighborhood of 1,000 or to 1,200 miles a year most years, and then race another 3,000 to 4,000 miles a year. So I actually sail more miles a year than I drive my car. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm part of the Ullman Sales group, and we have people online tonight to answer questions that come through. This isn't a really complicated subject that we're talking about tonight. It's more about things that you might not have thought about. Because sailing at night is the same as during the day, but obviously slightly different. So people often ask, what do you do at night? Well, my flat-out answer to that for the non-sailors is, well, where those lines intersect on the globe, there's flotels, and we stop and we go till daylight. But as a sailor, we all know that can't happen, and it's not going to happen, but it's a good starting point in the bar with the non-sailors. What really happens in cruising when you're sailing, you're going to sail more conservatively. You're going to stay further offshore. You're going to most likely reduce sail. You're going to review the weather more accurately than you would during the day. Like if you go out at 10 a.m. and you're planning to go till 10 p.m., you might not even hardly look at the weather. But when you're sailing at night, it's important to review the weather, because you're going to be less people on deck. People are going to be not at their prime because they're tired. People naturally do not function as well at night, especially in the first few legs of a voyage, and the visibility is less. So review the weather, know exactly what you're getting into, what to expect. And in racing, you want to make sure you have the right sail up. You don't want to be lazy and not change the sail just because you're tired or you don't want to wake people up. You have the possible change sail ready to go at all times, so that there's less time to make a sail change, and you don't have to take the off watch off out of their bunks longer than necessary. Know your boat and equipment. This goes for both racing and cruising. Know what parts of your boat are more apt to have wear, how hard you can push the boat, what the heel angle is, what your pullers are. We're going to get into that later on in this webinar. And keep your pedal down. If you sail, when you're racing in a long race and you're racing at night, if you sail close to the same performance that you did during the day and don't let up and just keep going, you're going to have huge successes. Our success in offshore racing with my group has been at night. I've had a slower boat and beat boats boat for boat to Hawaii because we put 30 miles on them at night and they would put 20 miles on us during the day. It's just a fact that people don't sail as fast at night. So if you could master that and practice that, you're going to have much bigger successes as the seasons go on and the racing goes on. So the outline of what we're going to talk about: dusk, how to prepare for the night. It's a key time in sailing at night is right before the sun goes down. You have great visibility. People are generally more vibrant. They get more. You can get more stuff done, more energy. Night vision. This is a huge issue with me on boats, and anybody that sailed with me across the ocean knows how important this is to me to be able to see. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. Trimming sails at night. We're going to talk about tips, techniques, and some of the technology. So for the racers, there's more technology, and there is some for the cruisers, and I'll touch on that briefly, but we won't go into. We could have 2 or 3 webinars basically on the technology of sailboats and what helps you around the globe and across the race course. So crew watch schedule. If you have a group of 4 or more doing night sailing, we're going to talk about how to do the rotations and how to divide the crew up. And this is really key, and it's how to keep people awake and working at not only a better performance but a much safer passage. And so wear and tear. This is a big issue when you start doing longer passages where you're going to be sailing at night or when you're sailing to Hawaii. Is in the first 24 hours of the race, you're going to put more hours on your halyards, sheets, sails, and rudder bearings and everything than you generally do in a whole year of sailing when you just sail in and out of your slip at the bay or in the harbor. That, now you take a trip like you're sailing to Cabo where it could be 5 days on a little bit slower trip or 4 days, 3 days on a fast one. That's 3 times. So you're doing 3 times the wear. So that's the same thing as if you only replace your halyards every 4 years, every 5 years. You're doing that by the time you get to Cabo. So think about that as a thing of potential wear when you're starting to sail offshore. Okay, know your emergency drill. This is really important, and at the end I'll talk a little bit more about some great training on this. Is how to wake up your off-watch crew in a hurry, whether you have a horn, a bell, stomping on the deck. Make sure everybody knows what the sound or what the signal is going to be when they're off watch, that they need to just get up on deck as fast as possible. And a lot of times it's a spinnaker rip or a spinnaker in the water, a halyard broke, or someone fell overboard. That's the absolute worst case scenario. And you need to know where the all hands positions are, meaning you have this documented. Everybody knows it. We, as a joke in one of the transpacks I was on, everybody wrote their all hands position in Sharpie on their forearm because we were talking about it. Because we wanted to make sure when everybody came up that we knew who was going on the bow, we knew who was going to be driving. And in the key positions, you have 2 people. One of those people may be in the water. And so it's a real simple formula to go over with your crew and to rehearse. And if there's only 2 of you on deck, make sure you have a steadfast way for getting somebody up and knowing how each person's going to handle it. Some people are a little bit stronger than others, and there's different ways they're going to do that. Who is in command? Remember, there's going to be 2 people. When you're racing offshore, you have watch captains. So there's going to be 2 watch captains, and those 2 watch captains are going to be who's in charge, depending on, there'll be a primary watch captain and a secondary watch captain. If they're both on deck at the same time, they're going to be, the primary one's going to be the person in charge. If that person's in the water, the secondary one is going to be the person in command. Everyone knows, make sure everyone knows how to click the man overboard on the GPS, the emergency in GPS. Some are very simple, some are harder, but just go through and review it with everybody because whoever's closest to it needs to do it. It doesn't matter how calm it is or how rough it is. Do it because you may be delayed in getting back to somebody. It'd be really a shame not to hit it and then to know all of a sudden get the sheets wrapped in the prop or something like that and not be able to get back to them faster, and then when you get back to them, you don't know their location. So these are just real simple things that you'll learn about these. I'm going to talk a little bit about the safety at sea seminars that they have from U.S. Sailing. Know your battery levels. This is one thing that cruisers constantly battle and racers have down to a science. The reason you want to know it racing is you don't want to carry more fuel than you need to charge your batteries, and you don't want to run your engine or your generator, whatever you happen to have, any more than you need to. And so you want to know how many hours a day you have to charge for your amp loads. And for cruisers, energy management is really key. It would be a shame to have 8 great days of sailing but have to run your engine every day to charge your batteries because you don't have a good management system, not knowing when it's full or things like that. So spend a little bit of time and knowing your battery levels and charge before dark, and don't wait till your instruments are flickering before you start charging, because you'll lose data and important things like locations like that that you don't really want to lose. So at dusk, right before the sun is hitting the horizon, now once the sun's on the horizon, you still have like another 30 minutes, but it's always like to start before the sun actually hits the horizon because projects might be bigger. You check the deck. You check that every halyard is unwrapped. You check that all the sheets are coiled and put away nicely. You make sure all the flying fish are off the deck. All those things that you can do. You go around, you check the gooseneck, you check the bang fittings, everything that can come loose and break. Look at the sails, inspect them, make sure that you're not going into the night with a small tear in your sail that could possibly get worse. Just go through the whole boat and check from bow to stern. Each crew member should theoretically have an area that they check. Now, halyards and sheets, you want those cleaned up and put away so that they can run freely and they're not at your feet at night. Because if you have to emergency take down a spinnaker and the halyard looks like the one on the right, you're going to have a disaster on your hands. And you want to make sure everything is organized and clean. And this kind of goes for during the day, but it's extremely important at night because when you get one of those little twist locks in a block and nobody knows where it's coming from, it's hard to spot it. And if you have 2 sets of sheets rigged, like when you're racing, you have 2 sets rigged, you don't even know which one is the active one because even with a headlamp, you can't tell the colors often at night. So spend some time cleaning up the boat, and it should always be completely clean before it gets dark. Now, did you guys spot the mistake in the previous slide? Let me give you a little hint. That is a mistake. Modern line doesn't get coiled in ovals. You want to flake it in a figure-8 pattern because you have to put a twist in the line to get it to coil in those ovals. So always do it in a figure-8 pattern. Naturally falls that way, and the line is less likely to get a twist in it and get stuck at the end. So that's a little cue for you. Actually, don't know what that beeping is, so you're going to have to ignore it. So pack spinnakers as soon as you take them down. When you go, this is mostly for racers, but it's also for cruisers because you just don't want to have clutter on the deck. Take your spinnaker down, immediately goes back in a bag. Lots of times, when you set the new spinnaker, you could put a tear in it. You may go right back to that sail, and it keeps you from making sure that all the bags are correct. Because there's nothing worse than thinking you're putting an A2 up and you put an A1 up. Now you've got to go through and do a whole nother spin chain. It's another halyard cycle, so you might be your last change for the night. But at night, you can't read necessarily the corners of the spinnaker to see which one it is. So if the bag comes up and it says A2 or A3, it needs to be an A2 or A3. So pack them immediately. Do not leave them unpacked. And make sure that all the sails are put away on deck. This is extremely important if you're going in different wind velocities and you have a Genoa and then maybe a Staysail and a Drifter and you have them all on deck. Now you're going into the night and you have all these sails on deck and the wind picks up. Sails are getting washed over the side. You're slipping on them, or your bow guys are slipping on them, and sheets get tangled underneath them. It becomes a nightmare. We've all dealt with that. So the trick is eliminating this stuff early, and at night you have to be a lot more diligent about it to keep those things clean. And then you're ready to use these sails if you need them. Now, I know it sounds like a lot of work, but that's part of sailing at night. Is it just takes a little more effort than it does during the day to sail at the same level at night. So when the sun's setting, just like in this photo, be aware of your surroundings. Know that if you're aimed at land, how far away that land is and what's the worst case scenario. If the land's 50 miles in front of you and you're doing 10 knots, you only have 5 hours. So if it's 9 o'clock at night, at 2 in the morning, you're going to be on dirt. And that's not where you really want to be when you're sailing the boat. So be aware of your surroundings and any boats that happen to be nearby. You know, look over the horizon. Know where other boats are. The AIS does most boats. It doesn't do all boats. Not all boats broadcast AIS, especially when you get into Mexican waters and in the South Pacific where you have people in Tongas and stuff. So know where the boats are, be aware of those, and make a visual idea, and make sure other people on the boat know where all these things are too. And where any hazards are, an island or rock or anything that is possibly in your way. We had some disasters here a few years ago where people didn't really pay attention where the Coronado Islands were, just going to Ensenada. So let's not make those simple mistakes. They're really easy to prevent, and a small briefing would have solved that issue. So night vision. Now, anybody that has sailed with me knows that I don't like lights at night. Most of the time the sky is bright enough to see what's going on, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But during the day, wear sunglasses and a hat during the day so that your eyes aren't completely dilated when the sun goes down. Use red light bulbs and flashlights in the cabin at night. Don't use white lights. I like to have the blackout curtain. It's just a piece of canvas that hangs in the companionway, so you can walk freely in and out of the cabin just by brushing the canvas up over your head or to the side. But it keeps any light that might come on from coming out and blinding the guys that have to look forward, like your sail trimmers and your drivers. So it's really important in cruising or racing. It's also a safety issue because the better your night vision is, you can see other boats more clear. And I guess put that in there twice. And so navigation instruments is another key, is that put them on the lowest setting where you can still see them. And if you have a chart plotter, generally I like to turn the chart plotters off unless I absolutely need it, so that I don't have that ambient light. Sometimes we just take a little canvas piece and put it over the top of it or the cap on it. Then when you need it, you look at it. To let you know, it's going to take you 20 minutes to get your night vision back after you look at a bright screen or at a white light. 20 minutes. And so you're kind of flying blind during that time. I mean, obviously you can see your vision is going to be extremely compromised. I don't like to use headlamps. In absolute emergency situations, you can use a headlamp. If you have a tangle, or bow guys often can use them. But for some reason, anybody that has a headlamp feels they have to talk to the person that has to see the most. They look straight at you, blind you, and now you're out of it. And people forget to turn them off, and then they look all around. And so I kind of have a no headlamp policy except for the bow guys. It's just they're great when you need them, but when you don't need them, they're a hazard, and it's a bit of an issue. So sail trimming at night. So we talked about this. I don't know how many of you guys were on the spinnaker trim course that we did last Tuesday. We're going to actually do that again next Thursday. A week from today, we're going to do that again because we only could have 100 people on the webinar, and we were maxed out, and many people couldn't get in, and people have asked for it again because they want their crews to see it. So we're going to talk more about that. But sail trimming at night Establish trim points on your sheets. Now, basically, that's just a piece of tape on your sheet that is either lined up with a pedestal if you have a grinder, or maybe in your hand where you're sitting on the boat, or at a block, somewhere that you can easily see it. And that's where the trim has been most of the time. That way, if you get a collapse, you can go right back to that spot, and it kind of keeps you from over trimming, and we know that that's slow at night, so that's slow at any time. Genoa sheets, tape near the winch so that when you're grinding in on the winch, you can see that tape come to the winch. You don't over trim, you know where it is off the spreaders. Spinnaker sheets I just went over. And main trim is generally done, day or night, is just done by the heel of the boat. But obviously you want to fine tune it a little bit, but at night you're kind of doing it with the heel of the boat. Sorry, I got stuttering there. But you're going to, downwind, there are times that you just have to use a flashlight to look at it. Now, they have this tape called Glow Fast, and it's glow-in-the-dark tape, and that picture to the left is an actual photograph of that stuff, and it lasts almost the entire night. If it got charged up by the sun during the day, it is amazing. And if you're going to race offshore, I highly recommend it. And so we put a lighter weight version of it on spinnakers so that you see the chevrons and you can see the collapse or curl of the spinnaker. And one big cue is you put a little bit of that on the center line of the wheel so you can see how much weather helm or lee helm a driver might have. Or if you got spun in a wave, you can immediately get that boat back to straight with your peripheral vision. One cue that one of my good guys that I've sailed 5 Transpacks with, he puts the Glow Fast tape on top of the clutches, the halyard and tack line clutches on the cabin top, and then in clear label maker, he puts what each of them are so that at night you can read those things on top of those clutches. And that's a really, really nice move, especially if you're not sailing with 100% the same people all the time and people have to read what it is before they release it. But I thought that worked out really well. Some of the other technologies that we have is some of the navigation and equipment that we use. The boats I sail on personally, we use Expedition software, and it does routing for us. And also, we log our sails in it, and it tells us what's going to happen. This little graph here shows you what the wind shifts we're expecting, so everybody knows what's going to happen. And we have that briefing before it gets dark, and so we know exactly what to expect as the evening goes on so that we can sail at a higher performance at night. And this is sort of a standard instrument pod layout on a Grand Prix boat. The top would be boat speed. The next one down is going to be your polars or your target speeds. So in theory, they match the boat speed on top, or you change out your driver. The true wind direction, which means if it's blowing out of 15 or if it's blowing out of 235, that's what's going to be reading on that. The true wind angle, that's the true wind angle to what we are currently sailing, and then the bottom one would be heading. And you want to keep a really uniform system like this so that whoever comes up on deck can look at the instruments and know exactly what they're seeing. And to sail at a high performance at night, instruments are key, especially in what I'm going to go into in a bit, are blackout conditions where you have no horizon. You still have to drive by the instruments. You can do a little bit by feel, but the closer you are to your targets, the better off you're going to be in this in the long run. And so we also run strip charts, which tell us if the wind is doing what we predicted it's going to do, if we're driving at the percentage, the polar percentage, so we know that our performance on our boat is right. We know whether we have kelp. We know all these things. So we always try to stay within 2%. So 98 to 100% is our goal all the time with that. Now, you need to have crew meetings before it gets completely dark, and obviously you're going to have them before you start the race. But we have before everyone goes down, like at the shift, the last daylight shift change, we kind of have a little crew meeting. That's the maximum people on deck. And You're going to update the helmsperson and the watch what the game plan is, what the wind is expected to do, what the shifts are expected to do, what sails are in the hatch, which ones we're using. You eat dinner, clean up, all that before dark because it's much easier to do in the daylight. Everything's easier in the daylight. Confirm the watch schedule, who's waking up who and where they're sleeping in the boat. The headings and the distances to obstacles and shore. Like I mentioned early on in this webinar, it's really important to know whether you're 50, 40, or 100 miles from shore, because if you get a header and you know that the shore was not in front of you when you're sailing at 130, but it's in front of you when you're sailing at 120, you know that you have a limited amount of time and that some navigation has to happen, that you can't indefinitely stay on that angle, and that's really important to know ahead of time. Update the wind and sail changes for maneuvers in the logbook, or we use a spreadsheet on most of the racing boats I'm doing, so that when the other crew comes up, they can kind of say, oh, okay, you guys changed sails here, the wind shifted here. It gives everybody a little bit more of a fresh look at where you truly are on the race course and what the trends are happening. You discuss the upcoming scenarios with wind strength and direction. That means, like, if the wind heads anymore, we're going to be going to a reaching spinnaker, or we're planning to go to the heavy number 1, or something like that. Talk about what the scenarios are. If the wind goes the other way, we're going to go to our lighter runner. And then you check the keel and rudder for forward, debris, anything while it's daylight. You most of the time can't check this at night, so you want to find the hours that everything's. Okay, we have a question here.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks everybody. You can send in questions, and we have one that was great with the glow tape. There was a question: is there a brand name for this tape? And
yes,
can it be ordered from Ullman?
Yes, it can be. It's called GlowFast. It's actually out of Australia, and we ship it in. It is expensive. I don't remember exactly the price, but it's in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 a foot. So you want to limit how many sails you're putting it on unless you have an unlimited budget. But it lasts. I mean, I've never had it wear out. I've had it on sails for years, and it's an incredibly good product.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, one more question here. After we had a halyard slip in the clutch in a night squall, we always load the working spin halyard on a winch drum. Are there other simple practices you do at night to prevent the unexpected in a night squall?
That's a really good point. I am a big advocate that all halyards live on, unless you have a lock, all halyards live on winches. The clutches are sort of a backup and a temporary thing if you need the winch for something else, and then we go back to the winch. Because two things can happen, and it's not just at night, but believe it or not, you're going to see more wind at night than you're going to see during the day. It can creep through the clutch, or you can break the cover, which is the worst scenario, because now when you try to lower the halyard, the cover is going to accordion at a block either at the masthead or at the base of the mast, and you're not going to be able to get that sail down. So but that's a good question about keeping the halyard loaded on the winch. The other thing at night, now if you're racing at a Grand Prix level, you always have the right sail up. But at night, you always want to err on slightly heavier sail than you would during the day. During the day, you always try to angle towards slightly lighter sail. And this is because at night, you're going to make more mistakes. We're all human. The visibility is less. You're going to be tired unless you're on day 8 at Transpac. You're not used to being up all night, and your rest of your crew is going to be in that same sort of condition. So the mistakes happen at night. I always joke with people that it happens at 2:30 in the morning every time, and that's where you're going to see the most wind. That's where you're going to see the most accidents. And I've had some tremendous disasters in the middle of the night. So that's why we go through these steps of making sure all those lines are clear and ready to go. One of the other tips that I didn't really talk about was the spare spinnaker sheets. We keep them coiled, but on the stern pulpit, so that they don't drag in the water. And just before we need them, we just run the shackle end, or the end that attaches to the spinnaker. We run that end forward just before we need it, but we don't leave them all the way forward. We leave enough out so that we can get to the bow from the stern pulpit. But this does a couple things. One is you don't grab the wrong spinnaker sheet. Instead of the active one, you don't grab the spare one. And you don't have it dripping in the water for speed. And if, God forbid, there's a disaster and you have to start the motor, it's one less line in the water that you tangle the prop. So those are really important things. So crew change, full brief for each position when you're in crew. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a watch schedule, but there's a highly recommended style of watch schedule. You can do many different ones, but the style that I'm going to talk about is fairly important as far as performance and safety. You set the boat up for the change. So we always combine the two best drivers on the boat with the two best bow guys on the boat, and those guys go in shifts together, so that you always have a good bow guy on watch, and you always have a good driver on watch, so that when things get a little crazy, you have some experience in those levels. And so you set the boat up for change, like you have the right spinnaker in the hatch that needs to be the first replacement that we're going to, based off our weather, or based off of if there's no change in the weather, we have two A2s. We may put a separate A2 in the hatch with the corners out, just in case we one, we're immediately back into another one, and we can deal with the arms later. Everything you notice, you talk about the weather, the true wind angle, the swell increasing, the trim. We often talk about in sea conditions, like, okay, I have to come all the way up to 135 true wind angle to build speed, but I'm sailing at a 137 wind angle. And other times you can sail at 150, but you only have to come up to 145 to build speed, depending on sea state. So these are things that you want to transfer the knowledge to the next group up. And I'm a big advocate on never having a person out of a bunk onto the helm. They always do some job before they hop on the helm, regardless of their experience level. So that's when we talk about sort of how the watches work. Depending on the size of the boat, but I like to have either one person change every hour. If you have 4 people, that's a 3 on, 3 off kind of deal. Or when on the bigger boats, we had 2 people change every 2 hours, and we had 4 on, 4 off. Now, 3 on, 3 off works for shorter races, but you don't get enough sleep if you're going across the ocean. If you're looking at a 7, 8, or longer day trip across the ocean, which most boats are, they're up to 12 or 14, you need some 4 hours off at times, because you never get a full 4 hours off. When you get the 2 best helmsmen opposite each other, 2 best bow guys opposite each other, and we usually have those people go in groups because they work better together. And then your 2 best turners opposite each other, 2 best pit guys opposite each other. You always want to have one of the strong people for each position on deck at a time, and then everything rolls through there. And we like to always, when I'm offshore, is sleep on the weather side. I know not all boats are really set up that way, but performance-wise, that's kind of a pretty important thing. So helming at night. Now, there's 2 types of sky that I consider at night. One's a clear sky with lots of stars and a moon, maybe no moon, but lots of stars. You can see not quite as well as you can during the day, but when your eyes are used to it, there is really no reason to have a light on. And I usually try to only use, depending on the boat size, is the tricolor at the top of the mast. I don't like to have the deck light, the deck level running lights on, because the reflection back from the spinnaker kind of blinds you. So if you can have no lights on the deck and a clear sky, when you're out in the ocean, it's amazingly bright, and you can see your sails fairly clear, and you don't need the lights. You only need the lights if you start using the lights, because then you're losing your night vision. Now, there's a condition we call blackout conditions. It's either cloudy with no lights, or right when the moon sets and it's still cloudy. If you race to Hawaii, we've all seen it, because there's a lot of cloudiness when you race to Hawaii. Those conditions are the toughest, and those are when you need to have the drivers that know how to drive by the instruments and can drive in those conditions. We have some incredible sailors that I've sailed with, and they cannot drive in the blackout conditions. They get a vertigo, and they can't keep the boat going. And that is a really important thing to stop before you end up getting a spinnaker wrap or something like that. So this was a slide that Bruce Cooper from Newport Beach was talking about, and we've gone back and forth on the discussion of it. Is get the salt off of your sail. Salt adds weight, but it also attracts moisture. It doesn't make sense to be flying a ½ ounce or 3/4 ounce spinnaker at night if it weighs as much or more than your 1.5 ounces because of the salt and debris on it and the moisture that it collects. So it also causes it to stick to your rigging and more likely to tear. So pre-race, make sure those sails are salt-free. That's a huge performance thing. Now, say you're going too slow, you got to know your target of your boat or the wind speed that you're sailing. So you're not guessing if you're going slow. You know you're going slow, or you know you're on that speed. The biggest reason that going slow at night, especially in light air, is over trimming. If when in doubt, let it out. Just always constantly easing those spinnaker sheets out. This is mostly for spinnaker sailing, but it still goes to Genoa trim. You do not want to, in light air, have sails in too tight that just stall and you're never really going to get going. And we don't really want to motor to our destination. We always want to sail. So if you're not on targets, figure out why you're not on targets. I always refer to it as like, hey, this plane's going to crash unless we get out of this stall mode. So spend some time learning the target of your boat. And like I said in my spinnaker talk, it's better to sail on targets that are not accurate than to not sail to targets at all. Don't let the boat speed go up and down and up and down and up and down. And also know what sail to have up when. Build your sail crossover chart. This is a fairly elaborate one with lots of sails. But don't say, oh, I think we're faster with this sail in this condition. Know when your boat is faster with a certain sail, and then stick to it until you prove it otherwise. This is why if you're using Expedition, just log the sails. It's going to tell you which sails are better. So spend some time developing that, and every time you learn something, update your sail crossover chart. That way, when you're asleep and there's a different crew on deck, they know what sail to have up, and you're always going to be at best performance. Obviously, this is a racing thing. If you're cruising, you're going to have better and most likely not to be flying it at night, especially if there's any wind. So sailing too low, and I talk about this in my spinnaker talk, sailing too low causes lure collapses and causes wraps. It's less stable, and it's not generally faster to your destination. So just because the boat's sailing a little bit more level does not make it a better situation for you when you're sailing at night. Always know how your boat should be performing at night. So here's a wrap. I'm going to go into the definition or the explanation of how to get out of the wrap. The reason it's wrapping is at the vortex behind the mainsail. It causes the air to spin on the back of the mainsail. Once it hits something stable, your force brake, the rest of the sail is going to spin around that. It's just going to keep spinning around that until something stops it. Identifying this early and then jibing the boom over and sailing low again will cause that sail to unwrap. So you jibe your boom. I know my diagram shows you jibing the bowl. You're not going to worry about the bowl. Your pole's probably been pulled and dropped. You just the boat sail extremely low with it, cause that wind to go the other direction, and it can unwrap that sail. And I've unwrapped big rafts doing this. So just learn that trick. Catching it early is really key. So on your sails, prep them well, inspect, clean, and fold them. Take care of them during the race. Keep them folded and organized. If you're racing, you get to stack them on the rail. And knowing where they are and making sure they're tied, not ready to drop off. That's a fall off the boat. We've lost very expensive sails over the side in the past doing this, so make sure they're set up. And change the sales before it's too late. Don't be scared to wake up people off watch, because if you blow up a sale, you're going to have to wake them up anyway. So it's better to do it before you ruin anything. U.S. Sailing has these safety requirements that us racers are required to have, and this is a great resource for cruisers as well, of all the safety items that you need, and it's free. You can just download it. It's ussailing.org. The other thing they have is a safety at sea. Now, as racers, we're required to do safety at sea seminars, and 1/3 of our crew has to do the 2-day, and 1/3 of our crew has to do the 1-day on these offshore races. Every time I learn something, and I sail almost every day. So I highly recommend you take one of these courses. They're not expensive. They come to every city, and they're a great resource for you for going on. All right. Do we have any more questions? I think Bruce Cooper's been online, and Greg Dare's been online, I believe, answering some. And so let's. Yeah, we have more minutes left if anybody has any. And if not, if you have some subjects you'd like us to talk about, because like I said, we're going to be doing 2 of these a week through this, and this one keeps getting extended, just email them to sp@ullmansales.com, and we'll get those going for you. Next Tuesday is a general sail trim. We're going to talk about Maine and Genoa and some spinnaker trim. And then next Thursday, we'll go in depth on the spinnaker trim. So we'll redo the one that we did the other night. All right. Well, you guys have a great night, and we'll see you next Tuesday.